So, what if I told you that every time you go to the doctor, part of your bill is for a lottery ticket? A lottery ticket you don't have a choice but to buy. It's a pretty wild idea, right? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today, straight from Chapter 14 of the book Nudge Theory. It's a look at healthcare costs from an angle I guarantee you've never thought of before.
The authors kick things off with this really jarring question. And no, they're not talking about scratching off a ticket at the pharmacy counter. They're using this as a powerful metaphor for something that's automatically included in our medical bills, whether we want it or not, or even know it's there.
We all know that feeling, right? Healthcare costs are just a lot, and we try to manage them. We pick different insurance plans, we try to stay healthy, but there's this one very expensive feature that's baked into every single transaction. It's something you simply cannot opt out of.
So what is it? It's the right to sue for negligence. Now, you won't see it as a line item on your bill, but believe me, its cost is absolutely factored into the price of everything. You can think of it like a mandatory insurance policy that you're forced to purchase with every single visit. Okay, think about your car insurance for a second. You can choose a higher deductible to get a lower monthly premium, right? You have some control. But with healthcare, it's totally different. It's like everyone is forced to buy the platinum-level sue the doctor policy, and there's just no option to say, hey, I'll take on a little more risk myself for a cheaper price.
So, why call it a lottery? Well, according to the authors, the way our current malpractice system works is so random and inefficient that who actually gets paid feels less like a fair justice system and more like a game of pure dumb luck.
First, let's just talk about the direct price tag. The estimates for what medical malpractice litigation costs the U.S. healthcare system every year are just staggering. We're talking somewhere between $11 and $29 billion. These are massive numbers that are directly passed on to us in our bills. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are all these hidden costs too. Doctors, terrified of getting sued, practice what's called defensive medicine. That means ordering a ton of expensive tests and procedures that you might not even need just to cover themselves. On top of that, this culture of fear makes doctors and hospitals less likely to report mistakes, which means they never learn from them. And that's just bad for everyone's health. And this right here, this is really the heart of the whole lottery argument. The authors point to what they call a stunningly poor fit between who actually gets hurt because of a doctor's mistake and who ends up winning a big payout in court. Okay, get ready for this number, because it is wild. A major study found that fewer than 2% of patients who were genuinely injured because of negligence ever even file a claim. So the vast majority of people who are actually harmed get absolutely nothing. So you see why they call it a lottery, right? It's completely erratic. You have some people winning huge payouts even when there was no actual negligence, while the overwhelming majority of people who were really hurt by a mistake get zero. It's random and, as the book argues, deeply unfair. And it gets worse. Even when a patient does manage to win their case, a huge slice of that money never even makes it to them. On average, something like 40% of the total award gets gobbled up by lawyers' fees and administrative costs. Just look at that. For every single dollar that's awarded in a malpractice case, the injured patient only ends up seeing about 60 cents of it. You're paying a really high price for this mandatory lottery ticket, and even if you hit the jackpot, the house takes a massive cut. Okay, so if the current system is basically a broken, expensive lottery, what's the alternative? Well, the solution proposed in Nudge Theory is built around a really simple but kind of radical idea. Just give people the freedom to choose.
Here's the big idea. What if patients and doctors could make a deal? The patient could agree to give up their right to sue for what's called negligence, and in exchange, the doctor or the hospital gives them a lower price on their medical care. A simple contract. This seems like a pretty reasonable option to have, doesn't it? So, why can't we do this now? What's stopping us? Why do the courts almost always refuse to enforce these kinds of agreements?
Well, the answer is a fascinating concept the authors call non-libertarian paternalism. Okay, let's break that down. Paternalism is when the courts act like a parent, trying to protect you from making a bad choice. And non-libertarian means they don't give you any freedom in the matter. They've basically decided that waiving your right to sue is a bad decision, so they just forbid you from making it. Period.
But this is where it gets really interesting, and where the whole nudge idea comes into play. The authors aren't suggesting a total free-for-all here. They're proposing we implement this choice with some really smart design, and crucially, with some serious safeguards.
Any kind of waiver would have to be crystal clear. It has to be in writing. It has to spell out exactly what rights you're giving up. It can't be hidden in some tiny print. And this is super important. It would only apply to honest mistakes, to negligence. It would never apply to intentional harm, like a doctor assaulting a patient.
And this is classic nudge theory right here. It's all about how you frame the choice. You could set it up two ways. You could start with the right to sue as the default and then let people opt out to get a discount. Or you could make waiving that right the default and let people choose to opt in and buy the right to sue for a higher price. How you set that default would totally change what most people do.
Then the authors throw out an even bigger idea. What if we just change the legal default for everyone? Right now, you can sue for mere negligence, basically a doctor making an honest mistake. The proposal is to change the system so that lawsuits are only for intentional or truly reckless harm. Think a surgeon operating while drunk. If you still wanted protection from simple mistakes, you could choose to buy that extra coverage.
You know, once you open this door to letting people choose their contracts, it leads to all sorts of other interesting possibilities for reform, way beyond a simple sue or don't sue option.
For instance, you could have contracts that put a cap on those huge pain and suffering awards. Or we could look at no-fault systems, which some other countries use. In those, patients just get a scheduled payout for specific injuries, without having to go through a long, expensive court battle to prove who is at fault.
Now, it's really important to get this. The point here is not to let bad doctors get away with things. The real goal is to run an experiment, to find out if giving people more freedom and more choice in their contracts could actually lower the insane cost of healthcare without making the quality of care any worse.
And in the end, that's the big question we're left with. Our current system forces us all to buy an incredibly expensive and inefficient lottery ticket. But is the answer to give patients the freedom to just opt out? Is more choice the cure for what ails our healthcare system? It's a lot to think about.